Hello, everyone. This is Michael, one of your coaches for the Tech Entrepreneur Nano Degree program at Udacity. We have a very exciting guest with us today for our webcast. It's Jazib Zahir. He is a CEO of Tintash, which is a web and mobile app third-party development company. And we're very excited to have him present today about some important topics that a lot of you have been asking about. Welcome.
Thank you so much, Michael. Really excited. Okay, so really glad to have this opportunity to tell you guys a little bit about my entrepreneurial journey, what my firm does, and I'm looking forward to some questions and being able to help everyone out. So let me take over the screen. Screen share, okay. And let me take that. Okay. And so, Michael, can you confirm for me that everyone can see my screen?
Yes, I can see that.
Oh, awesome. Great. So I'll just plunge right in. So thanks again. As Michael mentioned in my introduction, I am the Chief Operations Officer of Tintash, and I'm assuming most of you here haven't heard of Tintash. We are based out of Pakistan, and we are a consultancy slash services provider in web and app development. And so basically, we partner with lots of companies around the world who are looking to develop apps, games, and products that are either on mobile, on web, and we put together engineering teams for them and help them deliver their products. So in this presentation, I basically want to give you some idea of how we set it up, how we work with different clients, and hopefully to get you guys thinking about the process of after you come up with an idea, how do you work with someone to develop it? So let me just start with a little bit of my background. I'm a native of Pakistan, and it's so exciting to use a platform like Udacity to connect with people all around the world. I know lots of people in Pakistan use Udacity, and I know it's a great way to connect with people with similar interests all around the world. I actually am connected with the United States in a way and have lived there for some time. I studied electrical engineering at Stanford. That's my academic background. I've done lots of very interesting jobs throughout my career. One I'd share with you is, you may have heard of a company called D-Light Design, which is actually affiliated with Stanford in some way. It's a solar energy company, and I helped bring them to Pakistan. They were already set up in countries like India and across Africa, and they basically bring renewable solar energy products to the rural areas. So I was their consultant to help them set up here. I'm very active as a teacher and mentor in Pakistan, and chances are a lot of you don't realize how big the startup scene is in Pakistan. And I mean, I read about the startup scene in so many different countries around the world, and I'm surprised by how excited people are about tech entrepreneurship and how many people are trying to make a career out of it. And I'd like to share with you that Pakistan is also very big in it, and we've had some great success stories recently. So I teach at some of our local business schools, including the Lahore University of Management Sciences. And I've taught stuff like business communication and entrepreneurship. And I'm also affiliated with several of our major incubators and accelerators. And as a mentor, I work with a lot of the startups here. I try to guide them. I try to help train them and bring them to the point where they can grow further based on my experiences. Tintash is my primary thing, though. I've been affiliated with the company since 2009. And I've been very deeply involved in all of its operations, all of its strategy. So I have a very good sense of its strengths and weaknesses and how it works. So let me explain to you the concept behind something like Tintash. Now, Tintash is essentially an outsourcing slash consultancy firm. And there are many such firms around the world. It's even within Pakistan, there are like dozens of companies that are in our sector. And we focus on developing different kinds of products, whether they be mobile, whether they be web. Mobile is kind of where we started, since that was our initial focus. And gradually we shifted towards web as well, because as a company, we wanted to diversify, and we found a lot of clients we had in the mobile space were also quite interested in the web space. We have a very substantial team. We've grown gradually, organically, but at this point, we're well above 60 people. We have about 35 to 40 of those are engineers, and they're roughly spread between teams for iOS app development, Android app development, web, server, and cross-platform games. When you have a team of engineers like that, you need project managers to support them, you need QA engineers, you need UX designers, you need graphic designers. So we have all those people working together under one roof for our different clients. Now, the kind of value proposition that is offered by a consultancy like Tintash, first of all, is that we provide development for different projects in a rather cost-effective way relative to many other countries in the world. Yes, costs of labor are lower here compared to countries like the United States. And it's also that the market is somewhat less competitive. So if you're looking for a cost-effective, reliable way, you might consider trying to develop your product through Tintash. Another major strength of our industry and our firm, I would say, is that since we have a team of people working on so many different projects, they become a repository of knowledge and exposure. So they keep learning from different projects and they're able to apply those learnings into new projects that come in. So that is the strength of a team. Most of all, I feel the value proposition I communicate to people in trying to explain to them why they would work with a company like Tintash is that no firm can be good at everything. You know, maybe you're very good at coming up with the idea. Maybe you're very good at marketing it, but you're not good at finding technical talent. You don't know how to hire the right team and retain it. So we try to take that hassle away from you. So you can focus on your fundraising, your marketing, your front-facing stuff, and you can have a dedicated team of experienced people doing the development here. And that becomes particularly useful when you're in a situation where you need to scale up the team or scale down the team, because when you have to manage all of that on your own, it's quite a hassle. But when you are working with an outsourced team, they can scale up the resources and scale down the resources in a way that reduces your own costs and headaches. So a lot of you probably are already exposed to this idea of freelancers. You know, you may have sought out freelancers to develop your different projects, and that's a great option for a lot of people. You can find some really great freelancers, and all of these online portals that allow you to find freelancers, they allow you to identify the best person around the world to work with, and you can scrutinize that person, you can do a trial with that person, and it's a great way to get your product developed. But for a consultancy like Tintash, the value proposition really that we're adding above freelancers is that we introduce an element of redundancy in the setup. For example, if you're working with one freelancer and for some reason the freelancer doesn't want to work with you anymore, or you don't want to work with him, or your communication breaks down, or he's just not able to deliver, there's no redundancy there. You know, maybe that freelancer is working half the way across the world, and you don't know how to get in touch with him after a certain point. But when you're working with a consultancy like Tintash, we have enough redundancy that, well, if the primary person working on your project leaves, we are bound to get you a replacement. We have a pool of talent we seek out. We have a large team. So that's how we provide redundancy. You know, maybe your primary engineer needs to take a break for a couple of weeks or something. So your project won't stop because we're able to plan to have a replacement who understands what needs to be done. And that's how we introduce redundancy. A big value proposition of a consultancy like Tintash really is that a lot of times you are at a stage where you have a project that just does not need one freelancer. You don't just need one iOS developer. Maybe you need two with slightly different specializations. Maybe you need an Android team member. Maybe you need a web team member. Maybe you need a graphic designer, and you need them to be communicating frequently. So when you start relying on freelancers, and maybe you have 4 freelancers in 4 different points across the globe, communication becomes a big overhead. But when you're working with one firm and the 4 people are under one roof, they see each other every day, they bounce ideas off each other every day, chances are you can have a more seamless, stronger, more robust experience working with a team that's under one roof that has the experience of working together. And one of the underappreciated aspects of a consultancy, I would say, is that consultancies come with a certain structure. You know, a freelancer is a lone wolf. He himself decides what skills does he have, what training should he be undertaking. But when you're part of a consultancy like ours, we are giving people a career path and we're giving them milestones. This is what you need to be able to achieve in your first year. These are the skills you need to be able to develop in your second year. And no matter at what stage of the company you're at, there will be other people who are more senior or who are at least better at some aspect of development, and you can seek these people out. For example, in a company like Tintash, we have very regular code reviews. So if an engineer is working on a project, even if from the client's point of view, it's going great, we would still be looking very carefully at his code as a company to continuously identify his sources of improvement. And that's the kind of structure we feel forces people to keep improving and to maintain a very high quality. And another aspect of a consultancy versus freelancers is that a consultancy provides a certain environment in which discipline is enforced. We go through a process of vetting people, hiring them, assigning them a certain number of leaves, making them work under a certain schedule, and that forces them to work on a certain routine and discipline, which is needed to execute a project. Whereas a freelancer working on his own schedule, I'm sure a lot of them are very disciplined, but if they're not part of a structure which enforces it, there are some chances that slippages may occur. So all of these things in mind, keeping all these things in mind, you can see that there's quite a bit of value that comes out of a consultancy versus working with freelancers. And that's the model a company like Tintash works out. We try to be a consultancy that provides all these benefits above freelancers, and that's why people seek us out and want to work with us. Let me tell you a little bit about my personal motivation for setting up a consultancy or for going to entrepreneurship in general. I mean, like a lot of you, I was very interested in entrepreneurship because a lot of people around me were into it and it seemed like such a cool thing to do. I was very fortunate to study at a place like Stanford and be in Silicon Valley at the right age, and to see that this was something that was really a very special way to spend your life. And when I was back here in Pakistan, I was always thinking about how do I bring a little bit of that entrepreneurship bug here? And really, one of the most cost-effective ways to get involved in entrepreneurship was to set up a consultancy like this. What's really exciting about running a consultancy is you are exposed to so much. Right now, I'm doing projects in edtech, I'm doing projects in healthcare, I'm doing projects in gaming. So when I don't end up dedicating myself to just one sector, there's new challenges, new excitements really on a daily basis. And that's what makes my job very exciting, very rewarding, and allows me to have such a broad range of interests. Another reason why I was very excited about this opportunity to be part of something like Tintash is that I've realized that the key part of entrepreneurship really is the excitement of setting up your own culture. When you work for larger companies, you may love the culture, but you may also see areas that you'd like to improve upon. You may feel that there are things you would do very differently. And I feel that working at other companies in Pakistan, I saw that the culture was not exactly what I wanted. And my only chance of really setting up the culture of transparency, of merit, of empowering people, of encouraging people to do their best was to be involved in a company like this, which was entrepreneurial and which really had that kind of ambition. And this is true of nearly all consultancies out there, that the reason we do these different projects, of course, yes, is to have a sustainable business, but it's also by doing such a wide range of projects for other clients, we build a very vast network of knowledge and resources. We get a very good idea of what works, what doesn't work. We develop technical skills, we develop managerial skills, and that allows us to ultimately develop our own products. So a lot of the benefit, a lot of the purpose of setting up a consultancy like Tintash is to be able to develop a knowledge base so that ultimately we feel prepared to work on our own products. So you're probably thinking, it's a company in Pakistan, nobody's ever heard of it. How do they even build up a client base? And that's a very fair question to ask. Sales and business development efforts are very key to a business like ours, and they're not easy. And the truth is we take business development extremely seriously, and we undertake a lot of very active steps to build our client base, which has gradually been growing and is quite substantial. And we work with some pretty big names. If you have a look at our website, we've worked with companies like Electronic Arts and BBC, and if you look at our portfolio, you'll see we've done a very wide range of projects for some pretty good and sophisticated clients. And here are some of the techniques we've used to achieve that. So we do quite a bit of targeted cold calling. When I describe it as targeted, I mean, we don't just have an army of people who are spamming potential clients with emails. We actually think about, who are the right clients for us? What is the size of the company? What is the sector of the company that we would be able to execute a good project for? And we identify them, we get in touch with them through LinkedIn, through emails. It's not easy. A lot of people don't respond. Quite a few people get annoyed, but the conversion rate is incredibly high. When we started out this process, I'll admit I was quite skeptical that, if we just cold call people, why would they respond? Why would they want to work with us? But the truth is, by reaching out to a fair amount of potential clients, as long as we are able to get their attention through our portfolio, through our value proposition, a lot of them are interested and have been looking for someone like us to work with. So the conversion rate through this channel is actually quite high. Another thing we do on a very regular basis, we attend conferences where people specifically come to meet developers and to identify ways to develop their products. And that involves myself and the rest of the management of the company frequently visiting the countries where our clients are based, which is primarily really the United States, though we have a bit of a foothold in the United Kingdom as well. So we go to conferences, we travel there a couple of times a year. We have FaceTime with our clients, and FaceTime is really, really important. I mean, I feel like you can do quite a successful project even when you're just working with people on Skype and stuff, but nothing beats sitting down with someone in person, discussing the project, and the kind of trust and credibility you build that way is really priceless. And perhaps the best way we expand our client base is through referrals. We have many active clients in one go, and thankfully a lot of them are happy, and they refer us to other people in their network, and we're always asking them for referrals. We're always asking our friends for referrals, and that's easily one of the best ways, one of the lowest cost ways to keep expanding a client base. So the truth is, consultancy like Tintash that has been fairly successful, that is able to get quite a lot of attention from potential clients. Even we have a process. We don't just say yes to everyone who wants to do a project with us. Everyone who comes to us, I mean, we get a lot of cold call emails with people saying that, hey, can you develop this iOS app for me? Can you develop this Android game for me? We don't say yes to everyone. We try to respond to everyone to understand their project, but we ourselves are also picky about deciding who to work with. And when we have an introductory call with a potential client, we try to assess a couple of things which affect whether we want to continue the conversation with this person. And I mean, I had such a call just a few hours even before this webcast. And basically, these were the kinds of things I was trying to evaluate on the call. I was basically trying to understand that, is the client really serious about the project, and does he understand what he wants? And if he doesn't understand what he wants, can I plug the gaps in his knowledge and try to explain to him, well, maybe this is a reference for what you want to build, and I think this can work, and I think that can't work. I need to understand that the client has the right mindset, and he has a good idea, he is a little flexible on it, and he's able to answer my questions so that it's not too abstract an idea where that just isn't ready to be moved to the development stage. If it's not ready to be moved to the development stage, I'll give him some tips and say, well, why don't you get wireframes made on this first, or why don't you get these questions answered by going and getting your idea validated first before we jump straight into development, because we should jump into development once we're quite sure we want to go ahead and have a pretty clear sense of what we're trying to build. There are lots of different technical approaches you can take. You can use cross-platform engines, you can make a native iOS app, you can make a native Android app. I discuss the pros and cons of different approaches with potential clients because I want to make sure that we both have a technical approach we're both comfortable with. I don't want to just tell the client, well, I'm going down this way, and for him to feel later, well, we didn't discuss it properly and I didn't understand the pros and cons. At its heart, what I'm really trying to evaluate on an introductory call is, are we going to be successful at the project or not? And the truth is, no matter how good your firm is, no matter how big your firm is, no matter how skilled your firm is, it just can't be equally successful at every project. Every single firm, whether it has hundreds or even thousands of engineers, has certain areas in which it specializes. Certain projects it can execute better than others. So I have to ask myself, do I believe my team can execute this well? Are all the signs pointing in the right direction? If I have doubts, then I would prefer not to take up the project. I mean, there are lots of factors I consider, but off the bat, if I feel, this is very different from anything we've done in the past, I don't think the people I have available right now have the right skill set, then I wouldn't say yes to that client, because my purpose of working with a client is to make him successful. So I can only go ahead if I believe I will be successful at executing his project. I do try to assess from the client, are you realistic about how long this will take? Do you have a budget available? Because now the truth is, no matter how well defined a project is, software is just that kind of industry where it's very hard for an engineer to say right away, I'm going to do this in X amount of weeks or X amount of months, unless he's built something very similar in the past. The truth is, software is just a very challenging industry where there can be quite high variance on how long something can take, and requirements tend to be a bit fluid. And once you start building things, once you start evaluating them, chances are you'll ask for iterations, and it's very hard to lock somebody into a particular timeline budget well in advance. So what I try to do is at least get a very ballpark estimate upfront that, I think this is going to take 4 months or 6 months. Is that consistent with your timeline? Do you have X amount of budget to cover the costs? And if I believe the client has thought these things through and is ready for them, then yes, it's likely that we would go ahead on the project. From a strategic perspective, I'm also thinking about, why am I working with this client? Now, no matter how exciting a project is, there should be some underlying strategic reason for me taking it up. I am not just going to say yes to everyone. I ask myself, is this client likely to be valuable to my company in the long run? Will we get lots of opportunities to work together? Will we build something that my team will enjoy? Will we develop skills that will be useful? Will this create many other opportunities for us? So those are all things I'm assessing when I'm deciding, do I want to work with this client or not? And ultimately, I do want to make sure that even if things seem okay, they're actually okay when we start working together. So I offer the client often, let's just work together for a week. Let's see how things progress. Let's make sure my team is showing tangible progress. Let's make sure you're comfortable with the way we work and the way we communicate and the rate at which we're working. And if both sides are happy, then yes, we should go ahead and extend this relationship. Now, from the client's perspective, there are obviously a lot of things the client is thinking about. There's Tintash and there's lots of other firms that do the same thing. And the client is looking to spend money on these services to get a certain product built. And to part with his money, it's important for him to think about, well, am I going to get value for this money? And that's why, just as I scrutinize the client to decide if I want to work with him, the client also conducts his own due diligence to decide, well, do I want to work with this particular team among the different options? Most clients are fishing around for different potential partners to decide who they want to work with. Sometimes it's cost considerations, sometimes it's specialization considerations, but these are all things that are part of the due diligence. You would definitely ask someone you're considering as a developer for your project that, can I see your portfolio? Can I get some referrals? You want to talk to other people who have worked with him. You want to talk to other people who have worked with a freelancer or a consultancy, just to make sure they've had a good experience. And the purpose of a portfolio is to make sure the consultancy or freelancer has the relevant experience. And the truth is, software is such a broad field that even if somebody is a specialist in, for example, Android development, he may not be a specialist in exactly what you're looking for. Maybe he's always built e-commerce apps, but you're looking to build a game. So it's important for you to try to convince yourself that his portfolio includes projects that are relevant to you and that demonstrate a skill set that is relevant to your project. Because if he's done something similar in the past, he will be able to execute your project efficiently. But if he hasn't, then it'll take him all the longer to figure out the things that an experienced person might already know. And during these early conversations we have in the back and forth, both sides are discussing the approach. I should be comfortable with the client's approach to why he's building this and how he wants to build it. At the same time, he should be comfortable with what input I give him. And no matter who you work with, no matter how much you trust them, do get their initial assessment of the timeline and budget, and understand that yes, it can evolve with time. Features can change, requirements might become clearer later, timeline and budget priorities may change, but at least get people to make an initial estimate so that you're not caught completely by surprise. Now, let's think about the next phase. Let's say you've decided who you want to work with, you've signed your contract, you've made an agreement, and now comes the actual execution stage, which is what the project is all about. Now, I have realized after the dozens of projects I have personally managed that client communication is so underrated. It's a key part of keeping a client happy. It's a key part of keeping a project on track. And we tend to take it lightly. You know, a lot of times the developer thinks, okay, I understand the project. I'm working on the schedule we agreed upon. But because he's not regularly in touch with the client, a few weeks later, he gets this rude surprise where he realizes, you know, I misunderstood, I wasted time. And that's why in a well-managed project, this communications frequency and the form it takes is very critical. So on any project, I would at least once a week, no matter how smoothly things are going, want to sync up with the client to just get a sense for, okay, is he overall happy with how things are going? To make sure we agree upon what progress has been made recently, to make sure we agree upon what we need to be working on next, to make sure we both understand how the timeline and budget has evolved since we last spoke, and to apprise the client of what risks might be coming up. You know, things can go wrong in projects, but if you keep the client up to date on something you found that could delay the project, that could increase the budget, that we hadn't thought about when we initially developed the specifications, he'd like to know as soon as possible. And the only way to communicate that is to make it a priority to be communicating so regularly with the client. So that's why this weekly call with the client becomes so critical to keep everyone on the same page and to be able to regularly assess the satisfaction levels on all sides. And yes, I think that weekly sync up that may last even an hour or two is very critical, but I also want to keep the client up to date on a daily basis. Even if we're not speaking in voice over Skype or whatever, I would want my engineers to have an daily update, just a very short one. You know, I had 8 hours today. This is how I spent them. I solved this bug in 3 hours. I added this feature in 4 hours. And tomorrow I'm planning to work on this. And to do it well, I need these clarifications. I need you to give me this information. And this is very key when you're working in outsourced environments where there's a substantial time difference, such as in my case, where, you know, we're about 12 hours off from the United States. So when we go home, there is certain information we can get from the client while we sleep that will be useful to us when we come to the office the next day. So maintaining that cycle of keeping them up to date on how you spent the day, what questions you need answered for the next day, that's exactly the kind of smooth working arrangement you need for good project execution. Now, in my experience, in again, having managed so many different projects and having witnessed how so many different projects are managed at Tintash, there's a very wide range of documentation and tools used. There is no project that is so straightforward that it can be done in an efficient manner without any form of documentation. You know, every project has its specifications, it has task lists, it has bug lists, and those need to be frequently and regularly updated to keep things on track. Most recently, I've seen that a lot of clients have shifted to Slack. I know that's a big movement in the United States, and when the clients in the United States work with people around the world, they want them to come on Slack. And I'll admit, I personally have not had a chance to use it much yet, but a lot of my team members have got really into it, and they've seen that it's very effective to maintain efficient and accurate communication. A lot of engineering success comes from making sure that wireframes are drawn out correctly and accurately and capture all of the requirements and are aesthetically pleasing. And the tool that I've seen most of my clients use is InVision, whether they make the wireframes themselves or whether one of my team members uses it. But once you have those wireframes in front of you, it's helpful because everyone can visualize what the product will look like, and everyone can get a sense for how long it might take. Once I have a written description of the project, I have a very abstract notion of what it'll be like. But as soon as I get the wireframe in front of me and I see, okay, this is the data I can enter on this screen, this is the ways I can reach the next screen, it makes it easier for me to give you a more accurate estimate on how long something might take. Then what I've seen is clients have different preferences. I have some clients who like to use Jira, some who like to use Pivotal Tracker, some like GitHub, some use Google Docs because they just are most comfortable with that. And I don't enforce any particular system upon a client. At Tintash, we see that whatever the client is comfortable with, we can adjust according to that. Everyone in the team has used multiple different ways for project management and bug tracking. So whatever the client is comfortable with, we use these systems, and we find that the more efficiently these systems are used, the more efficient is the project execution. So that was kind of an overview of the process by which a firm like Tintash works. And I hope it's useful for you guys thinking about developing your own products and what might be the process if you collaborate with someone for that. Let me just give you one short case study on one of my long-running clients, Common Sense Media. They're in the Bay Area, not too far from the Udacity office. And we've been working with them for, I believe now, over 4 years. And basically, they are a nonprofit, and they develop different apps and games to educate people on how to use the internet in a safe manner. So their products are aimed at kids, they're aimed at parents, and it's to make sure that people of the current generation are educated on how to use the internet safely and what precautions to take to not give away information, to make sure that you keep your kids safe online. So the app I work with them on, called Kids Media, on iOS and Android, it's basically an app that helps you identify what is appropriate for my child. So I look at lists of new movies, new games, new TV shows, and they have a lot of editorial content on, yes, this is appropriate for a 7-year-old, a 10-year-old, and whatnot. Now, because I've been involved with this client for so long, and I've seen their hundreds of thousands of active users, I've seen how a product evolves, which is very exciting for me. I've seen how every year, to maintain our user base of the hundreds and thousands of users, we do very regular UI updates. Apple, Android, they're always updating their UI, they're bringing in new features. And to keep your app fresh, to keep it up to date, to keep it relevant, you need to keep adjusting its UI and making it consistent with whatever are the latest updates from these platforms. We've constantly made architecture updates too. So, in the beginning, all of the content was within the app and you just downloaded it in one go. But then we found that the content in the app, which is basically reviews of movies and games and stuff, was growing at an exponential rate, and the app was just getting too big. And so then we switched it to an architecture in which the data you need to show in the app just comes from the server. So you can keep a small and light app that is easy to download, which is what people want. And it can quickly update with whatever is the data you want to be looking at that point. And we found that to be a much more efficient and stable product. But that didn't happen in the first iteration. In the second year of working, we realized that was a better architecture. We use Google Analytics in the product, and we study it very closely to understand how our users are using the product. And what we realized was the most critical feature of the product was really the search. 80–90% of the people were just using the search. They wanted to see a review on Batman. They wanted to see a review on Star Wars. They wanted to see a review on whatever was the latest movie everyone was talking about. And what we found was that we could improve our user base and retention by just making search faster and more accurate. So once we zeroed in on the fact that most people are using our app because they want to search, we could focus our resources on that and make sure the search was as efficient, as accurate, and as responsive as possible. So the first objective was to make sure the app was useful to a lot of people. Once we got those hundreds of thousands of active users, the next step was really to understand our users better. There was always profile creation on the website, but we wanted that more people's profiles should be created on the app so that we better understand who is using the app, what are they using it for, how can we direct them to the content that is most relevant to them. So gradually we've introduced this feature. You log in through Facebook, Twitter, so that we can see exactly who are the users, store their profile, and allow them to store relevant data against their profiles. Now the big step we're making as the app continues to evolve and we want to keep it relevant is to actively use notifications, because what we found is somebody installs an app, they use it when they need it, but with time, it becomes less relevant to them if there's nothing new there. But what we found is that if we send periodic notifications, not very frequent, because if you send people frequent notifications in an app, they get quite annoyed. But every 1 or every 2 weeks, we just send a notification with what's new. As soon as Star Wars was on the app, we sent out a notification saying you can read its review. And we found that by sending timely and relevant notifications, people are more likely to keep coming back to the app. So they might have forgotten about the app because there are so many on their phone, but when they get a notification on something that's interesting to them, they'll come back to the app. So we have been using notifications to improve our retention. And really, long-term app management, that's what it's all about. Retaining your user base, staying relevant to them. And one of the ways to do that is just to make sure you notify people with important updates and keep giving them a reason to come back to your app. So on working on this product that has stayed relevant for so many years, I've seen that there is so much you can do and there's so much reason to keep working on a product. Once you build it the first time, yes, it could be very successful, but to keep it relevant for people, to keep more people using it, to keep people coming back to it, you need to keep tweaking it, understanding how people use it, and give them some reason to keep coming back to it. And I think that's true of all apps and all services. And that's why the process is never over once you've just built it out the first time. The process is ever evolving. And to keep it relevant to everyone, you need to keep thinking about how to evolve it with time. So that's where I like to kind of wrap up. I hope it was useful for everyone in terms of getting people to think about how to, what's the process of developing an app? How do you work with different teams that can develop it? And I hope I gave you some food for thought of things to think about while coming up with your product ideas, while deciding how to get them developed, while deciding how to maintain and update them. And I hope that there are some questions that have come up that I can help you with. And I am really looking forward to interacting more with people and hearing what you thought about it.
Yes. So one question that I know I receive a lot of questions about is when dealing with a consultancy specifically, how do you as a company handle things such as intellectual property? I mean, a lot of our students are concerned about the loss of the ingenuity or the newness of their product or their idea. Almost like they're worried that somebody's going to steal it type thing. Have you had clients who have had similar worries, and how have you dealt with that?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. I wish I had thought of addressing it off the bat, but that's something all the clients talk to us about. And in general, we start with signing an NDA, and we have our own template for that. And sometimes the clients have their own NDA, a non-disclosure agreement. And that protects the client legally, it protects us, and it sets the right expectations on what we're building for you as a service. We're not allowed to use it for anyone else. We're not allowed to write code for you and run away. And that's why, and I think that should be your basic expectation of working with anyone. Sign an NDA for me and have this legal protection in place. The truth is, these situations are very rare because ultimately protecting an idea is, honestly, a lot of people will tell you, like if you go to someone like a VC, he'll be like, well, I can't sign that because, ideas are a dime a dozen. It's the execution that really matters. And that's why they don't take that seriously. But in my case, as a service provider, I do want to take it seriously. I do want to have the legal paperwork in place. And again, if you're working with a company that has a good reputation of working with good clients, then chances are they have those processes in place for it not to be a problem.
Great. And then somewhat related to that same question, when an entrepreneur or a young company has gotten to the point where they've grown enough such that they now have a team, they have employees, and they are looking to transition from building products outside of their company to building them within the company, how does that transition work when they have used a consultancy firm in the past?
Yeah, no, that's another great question. I have worked with quite a few clients who have gone through the different stages. They first worked with a consultancy to get the basic product developed, but then they reached a certain point where it made sense to bring it in-house. The truth is, when you reach a certain point of investment, your investors might insist that you develop everything in-house. They'll be like, I'm giving you all this money so that the team all be sitting in one place because we believe that's the best way to get the job done. And it's something you need to plan for gradually. So I would say that if you've been relying on a consultancy for several years, once you've identified that I need to start moving it in-house, it's not going to happen overnight. You're going to hire an in-house person, maybe the first one, who's going to start managing the outsourced team, getting comfortable with what they've done, assigning them tasks on a daily basis until that person feels ready to bring it all in-house. So it's all about planning. So knowing in advance, I need to move this in-house so that you can gradually bring in people on your side who take over the steps from who take over the project from the consultancy step by step.
Excellent. And then I know in your presentation you mentioned kind of that the biggest part of being an entrepreneur is creating your own culture. That's something that isn't necessarily on the minds of a lot of kind of young entrepreneurs, I feel, just because they're more focused on, the product, making sure they have the right customer market fit, just making sure that they don't essentially, end up failing type thing. Can you try and provide some insights into how culture still is important and plays into those factors of success?
Yeah, definitely. No, culture is something I care a lot about. And even if you're just a team of 2 or 3 people, just having an agreement on different people's strengths and weaknesses, how you complement each other, what is your working style, what are the different commitments you guys are going to make, where you're going to work together, what expectations you have of each other, even that's part of your culture. At my end, because I'm dealing with a very large team, culture is about, okay, who reports to who, how do you set goals for people, how do you make them excited about coming to the office, and what kind of benefits do you provide them. But even when we were a much smaller company, similar things were important. Even when we were 5 or 6 people, just making sure that everyone got food in the office was important, because we didn't want people to go out at lunchtime. We wanted them to sit together, sit in the same place and share tables, to be always bouncing ideas off each other. So even at that scale of 2, 3, 5, 6 people, just having a reason to spend time together and going through these things together is very key.
Great. And then how do you, as kind of the leader of your group, kind of negotiate or handle situations that don't necessarily go according to plan, something that not necessarily is considered a failure, but something that would be less than ideal outcome?
Yeah. So that's something I've actually struggled a lot with. I, starting out, tended to be a micromanager. I wanted to take responsibility for executing all the projects well myself. But then I realized that wasn't allowing me to scale. And the truth is, for any company to scale, you do need to empower people. You cannot micromanage. But when something does go wrong, you do need to sometimes step in. Let's say a project just hasn't ended the way it was supposed to. I just found out about it now. I do need to look into and understand what went wrong. I do need to do a bit of a post-mortem and talk to my team members, make sure they understand what went wrong, and we have some concrete steps we're going to take in the future to not allow it to happen again. And I do need to step in and try to fix things for the client. If I realize it was really Tintash's fault that something went wrong, I want to try to fix it for the client as much as possible without giving him any further trouble, because even if there's no long-term benefit of that for me, I just want to make sure I don't burn the bridges and I end things on a good note, because that's a part of ongoing business relationships.
Great, because I know something I always stress to the students is, being an entrepreneur, you're kind of the leader, you're the visionary, you're kind of like the everything at the very beginning, right? And so it's just as important to begin to think about and learn kind of the things that we teach, like marketing and prototyping. At the same time, it's just as important to understand things like mindset, management, just how to really interact with people. I know on the topic of interacting with people, a common kind of concern, or I would say kind of hurdle, that a lot of students at the very beginning face is we ask them to do user research. And a lot of times that involves actually getting information from people who are complete strangers. Have you ever had that kind of happen through your life as an entrepreneur? Have you had to get feedback from people who you had no idea, and how did you handle that?
Well, I guess I've been fortunate as a teacher. I could almost rope in my students, so that gives me a big market. I've definitely worked on a lot of kids' educational products that need testing, and I can go to family members and stuff. But there have been times where people I don't know very well I've needed for product testing, and the truth is, it's really not that hard. I mean, not everyone's going to say yes, but you don't need everyone to test your product, and you don't need to take a lot of their time. Get them a little excited about what you're doing and just give them a chance to tinker with it. The whole point of market research is, I think, at the prototype stage is to give people something and see how they use it, to understand how a typical person might use it. And when you're doing basic market research, as long as you're talking to people who care about that product, I think they will answer. I think about, it was a decade ago where I was doing a market research project to improve my high school. And I found that there were so many people who cared about improving it that they willingly came to the focus groups I held, and they had so much to say and share with me. So I think as long as you pick the right focus group that cares about the product you're working on, they will want to contribute, and they'll have lots of ideas they'll want you to hear.
Definitely. I mean, I always tell the students to, as long as you have that focus, and confidence, of course, and just provide the people that you're trying to interact with some idea of kind of your motivation, that you're not trying to necessarily make them shell out their money and pay for something. It's just more or less, it's more of a conversation. It's not an interview. It's not, an interrogation. It's just a conversation. And that's something that is a little nuanced, but something that is really important to learn, to do user research. One last question before we have to wrap up. Just for our students who, a lot of them have kind of either some background in business or some background in coding, but a lot of them are kind of just new to the entrepreneurial mindset. They're very keen on learning. Do you have any kind of words of wisdom or advice to keep them motivated through kind of the sticking points, the tough times?
Yeah, no, the truth is that people from all kinds of backgrounds get involved in tech entrepreneurship. Yes, there are the typical business and tech people, but there are lots of people from humanities, social sciences, law background I know who have been very successful in this space, but they had an interest in this space. So even if you are not going to be the coder on the project, as long as you take some interest in coding and gradually learning about it, so that even if you're never actually the coder, you appreciate what it takes and you can contribute to some of the strategic decisions, I think you can contribute a lot. And just the sheer number of people out there who have been successful in this industry without having specific academic credentials for it, I think is a really big plus point, and something that should encourage everyone that, yes, this is a great sector to be in. It's easy to find people to partner with. It's really, the way I see it, the only career opportunity out there that gives you so much flexibility and opportunity to exercise your passion. So the effort you have to undertake to be successful at it is really worth it just for that reason.
Well, we appreciate you spending the time to come up with your presentation and spend an hour with us and our students. And we look forward to hearing from you in the future. Thank you very much, Jazib.
Well, thank you. It was a great experience, and I hope it was helpful for people.
It was. Well, everyone, until next time, happy learning.